Tonight on Ukraine Today, a massive Russian attack only in Ternopil. The occupiers killed at least 25 people last night. The battlefield situation, why are trenches slowly disappearing along the front line? Zelenskyy meets Erdoğan. The main topic, a just peace for Ukraine. Trump's ambitious plan. How exactly does the US president want to destroy Russia's military potential? All this and more, right now. Hi there, my name is Volodymyr Robchun, and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit that like button, and let's move to the news. The occupiers carried out a massive night attack on peaceful Ukrainian cities and towns. They targeted energy facilities and civilian infrastructure using drones and missiles. In Ternopil, the Russian strike hit residential buildings and killed at least 25 people. Dozens were injured, including children. Rescue operations continue at the site. Sadly, the number of casualties may grow. In Kharkiv, the invaders damaged apartment buildings. Dozens of people were hurt. Lviv region, an energy facility and civilian enterprises were hit. In the Ivano-Frankivsk region, the occupiers attacked energy infrastructure with drones and missiles. 3 people were injured. In the Cherkasy region, a power line and private houses were damaged. In total, 48 missiles and 476 UAVs of different types. Ukrainian air defense forces destroyed 483 air targets, almost all of them, but just 7 missiles and 34 strike drones were enough to cause serious damage. Now to the front line. The advance of the Russian occupation army near Pokrovsk and Mirnograd in the Donetsk region remains minimal, even though the enemy is throwing enormous resources at this priority direction. Ukraine's military reports this. More on the situation on the battlefield in our story.
Russia is on fire. An underground section of a main gas pipeline exploded in the Omsk region. And in addition, drones attacked the 2 main thermal power plants in the occupied part of the Donetsk region. The city and several other settlements lost power. But that's not all. The Russians are bombing their own people in the Belgorod region. In 11 days, 8 aerial bombs were dropped from Russian planes onto the heads of local residents, causing fires and destruction.
Cars burned, the fire started. They hit the minibuses. 114 or 18 people were injured. No way!
And while Russians in the rear are dealing with the aftermath, the occupiers are also getting hit on the front lines. Drone forces destroyed Russian robots at a critical section. The Ukrainian armed forces disrupted a new supply scheme for the occupiers. And the battle continues. The advance of the occupying army in the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd area is minimal, despite the colossal resources the enemy has thrown at this direction, which is a priority for them. The occupiers are trying to encircle Ukrainian forces and trap them in a pocket. Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War write,
Ukraine's defense forces are conducting successful counterattacks not only in Pokrovsk itself, but also in the Pokrovsk direction. First and foremost, this refers to the successful actions of Ukraine's defense forces in the Shakov area, which in turn creates logistical problems for the occupying troops. And they have managed to significantly stabilize the situation in the Rodinsky area. Rodinsky is a key logistical hub for Ukraine's defense forces.
In Kupiansk, Russian troops have failed to encircle the Ukrainian armed forces and are gradually losing positions within the city itself. Ukrainian defenders have managed to cut the occupiers off from their main supply lines in the northern part of the city.
In Kupiansk itself, Russian assault groups are effectively cut off from ground logistics. The occupiers' logistics are maintained through the use of heavy drones. The occupiers in Kupiansk are using the so-called TFO infiltration tactics of small assault groups and the tactic of flag planting. That is, by carefully and deliberately infiltrating small groups consisting of 2 or 3 people, they attempt to create the convincing appearance by strategically planting the distinctive Russian aqua-fresh flag of the presence of occupying army units in various different areas and neighborhoods of Kupiansk.
France is developing a new generation of SAMP-T air defense systems. Ukraine will be the first country to receive these systems. The delivery dates have not yet been disclosed. As Zelenskyy stated, this new generation of air defense systems represents a very serious capability for intercepting Russian ballistic missiles.
This is essentially the European counterpart to the Patriot surface-to-air missile systems. At present, according to various estimates, up to 2 SAMP-T systems have already been delivered to Ukraine's defense forces. The SAMP-T system consists of 6 launcher units and a radar station. Currently, according to information available from open sources, the French army itself currently possesses up to 10 SAMP-T systems in active service.
Meanwhile, Poland is planning to deploy territorial defense troops to patrol key parts of critical railway infrastructure in the east of the country. After a sabotage was carried out on the line near Lublin, the Polish General Staff is now preparing for an attack.
Let me remind you, back in 2015, Ben Hodges stated that the Suwałki corridor is the Achilles heel of NATO countries. And let me remind you, the Suwałki corridor is a land corridor which, according to the Russians' plans, is supposed to connect the Republic of Belarus with the Kaliningrad region and accordingly pass through the territory of Poland and the Baltic states. That is why the Polish side takes the issue of a possible direct confrontation with the Russian Federation very seriously.
Moreover, Ukrainian military personnel may be involved in defending the eastern borders of the EU from Russia in the event that the war ends with a peace agreement.
In the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 850 soldiers killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that makes 1,161,230 eliminated occupiers. Additionally, over the past day, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 1 Russian tank, 1 armored vehicle, 12 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy equipment. Trenches along the line of contact are losing relevance because of drones. Unmanned aircraft have created a deadly gray zone 20 kilometers wide. How does this change the rules of war? What risks does it create for Ukraine's defense forces, and what are Ukraine's positions in the drone war? The answers up next.
A drone operator from the 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade perfectly drops a grenade into a trench with Russian soldiers. One of them tries to throw the explosive out but doesn't make it in time. As a result of the successful drop, several occupiers were eliminated. This is exactly what modern warfare looks like now. In fact, there are practically no assaults or frontal attacks with vehicles. Drones have put an end to positional warfare. That was the headline of an article published by the American outlet Politico.
The fighting in Ukraine no longer resembles the trench warfare of World War I. Instead, drones have erased the continuous front line, creating a kill zone. As a result, a gray zone of chaos has formed, stretching about 20 kilometers from the front line, where drones hunt soldiers. The wounded are left to die, as evacuating them is extremely difficult, and delivering ammunition, food and water to the fighting troops is nearly impossible.
The sky over the gray zone is shrouded in smoke from drones. UAVs are equipped with thermal imagers, cameras, bombs and cannons, and some lie in wait for hours on the roads, waiting for military vehicles to pass by. At the same time, there is a hunt for UAV pilots who are sitting tens of kilometers away.
We have moved on to a war of drones against drones. Now drones can set up ambushes, intercept enemy logistics systems, and disrupt supply lines. In addition, it has become more difficult to hold positions. If you are detected, all the weaponry in the area will immediately be directed at your destruction. Pavel Palisa, colonel of the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
Russian military public pages are quoting this article, but as always, in their own way. Here's one example of Russian propaganda, where it claims that Russian drones give the Ukrainian armed forces no respite, although in reality it's exactly the opposite.
Because of Russian drones, Ukrainian soldiers are forced to stay at their positions for weeks. Drones make evacuation, rotation, and the delivery of ammunition and food extremely dangerous.
Information from open sources shows that it is actually the Russian army that abandons its wounded soldiers instead of evacuating them. Now, Russia is also trying to keep up in the production of various strike UAVs. For example, in frontline areas, the enemy has started using a new type of Iranian drone, the Shahed 101, a warhead weighing 8 to 9 kilograms and a flight range of several hundred kilometers. So far, the occupiers have not managed to localize the production of this drone in Russia. The UAVs were produced in 2024 in Iran, but it's only a matter of time. The Russians learn quickly from their mistakes.
We're going head-to-head here, and they have some truly impressive and remarkable developments. Their scientific achievements are well established and fully functioning. Over time, they've managed to thoroughly crush and break down, any form of internal resistance or attempts to oppose the ongoing war. That's why they have these developments and the machine is working. They were preparing for war. They upgraded the Shaheds, turned Israeli drones into Lancets.
Drones have become so effective that they've even pushed artillery back from the front line and have made it nearly impossible to use armored vehicles to supply the troops.
Drones have become useful for delivery and evacuation, combat reconnaissance, and remote mining, tasks that were previously usually carried out by people in war.
Despite different resource capabilities, Ukraine currently has parity with Russia in drones on the front line, and in some areas even holds an advantage. But the development of this military component doesn't stop for a minute.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And now is the perfect moment to subscribe, like this video and share it. Please do it right now. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. Today, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will meet with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. Zelenskyy said this conversation will focus on how to help Ukraine achieve a just peace. By the time this episode is published, the meeting may have already happened, and you may know more than I do right now. A quick reminder, the media are actively discussing a possible direct meeting between President Zelenskyy and the Russian dictator Putin, which some suggest could take place in Turkey. Yesterday, the Ukrainian leader met with his Spanish counterpart, Pedro Sanchez. Sanchez announced that Spain is preparing a new military aid package for Ukraine worth 615 million euros, of which 300 million will go towards supplying weapons. The US State Department has approved the sale of equipment to support Ukraine's Patriot air defense systems, modernization of launchers, spare parts, technical support and logistics. The contract is worth $105 million. Meanwhile, Russia is expanding its aggression. A fresh example, sabotage on Poland's railways. Warsaw is preparing for war. The question is, will it have enough time?
There's no need to make things up and then, based on these inventions, form an opinion about Russia. There's no need to create an image of Russia as the enemy. You've come up with this idea that Russia wants to attack NATO. Have you completely lost your minds or what? You're as dumb as this table, honestly. Who came up with this? This is nonsense, you understand. It's utter nonsense.
The Kremlin has begun preparations for war against Poland.
We are now closer than ever to open conflict since World War II.
This is a pre-war situation. The General Staff has announced a planned attack.
The aggressor has started preparing for war. He is creating an environment meant to undermine public trust in the government, the army, and the police, in order to set the stage for potential aggression against Polish territory.
The Chief of the General Staff of Poland stated that recently there has been a significant increase in acts of sabotage and large-scale cyber attacks in the country. These events may indicate that Russia is creating conditions to destabilize the situation and weaken the state from within. One of the most recent such incidents was an explosion on the Warsaw-Lublin railway line.
Analyzing all the incidents that have taken place in Poland and in Europe, one can say that all the traces lead east to Muscovy.
Polish authorities believe that this episode and other similar cases bear the hallmarks of pre-planned operations that may be linked to the activities of foreign intelligence services.
The sabotage of the railway line on the Warsaw-Lublin route is an unprecedented act of subversion, directly targeting the security of the Polish state and its civilian population. We will catch those responsible, whoever they may be.
2 months prior to this, about 20 Russian drones entered Polish territory en masse for the first time. Poland's security agencies stated that the threat from the drones was more serious than the authorities had initially believed.
The claim that these were cardboard or paper objects is not entirely true.
The Polish leadership does not hide the fact that it is preparing for a direct confrontation.
We can respond to these threats either symmetrically or asymmetrically. We have the full arsenal of tools at our disposal.
Military analyst and former SBU officer Ivan Stupak is convinced that the Kremlin is already waging a hybrid war against Europe, and the only question is when it will escalate into an open conflict.
For Russia, what it is currently doing in Europe is already a war. Asymmetric, non-linear, hybrid, call it what you will, but it is ongoing.
Poland's strategic position between the Kaliningrad region and Belarus makes it one of the key countries for the security of all of NATO, and Warsaw itself plays an important role in ensuring the defense of the eastern flank. Subsequently, the defense of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania will directly depend on the ability of Polish forces to respond promptly to potential threats.
Everything depends on our stance, whether we can deter the enemy or encourage them to act aggressively.
While most European countries spent many years discussing the potential threat from Russia, Poland was engaged in systematic and targeted preparation. Over the past decades, Warsaw has significantly strengthened its military potential, and the buildup of its defense capabilities began immediately after Russia's annexation of Crimea.
While other countries waited to see who would make the first move, Poland took action.
In 2024, Poland's defense budget rose to 4.7% of its GDP. This is the highest figure among all NATO member states. The modernization of military equipment and the increase in troop numbers to more than 200,000 make the Polish army one of the largest in Europe. In addition, Poland has become one of the largest purchasers of weapons from the United States. The country has invested about $50 billion.
Without the United States, there is no alliance. We need to spend more on defense, not to replace the Americans in Europe, but to keep them here.
The Poles are tired of the war that is going on in the neighboring country. That is why there has been a deterioration in attitudes toward Ukrainians among them. Poland's Minister of Defense stated that people do not see the main enemy, and those who incite against Ukraine are acting against Poland.
This should be valued and respected, not used to incite hostility toward Ukrainians in Poland or to stir up anti-German sentiment.
The Chief of the General Staff of Poland called for the creation of a Cold War 2.0 for large-scale investment in defense and for making it clear to Moscow that any attack on NATO would receive a decisive response. Now, however, the future of European countries depends on NATO's readiness to defend itself.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
And finally, pressure on the terrorist state. Trump has a plan. He wants to destroy Russia's military potential by completely cutting off its oil money. It sounds promising. The transition from words to action could take years, but what if I tell you this plan is already coming to life? Details right ahead.
America is preparing to deliver the most painful blow to the Kremlin. Donald Trump makes it clear, the era of soft sanctions is over. If Russia does not stop the war, the world must cut off its oxygen.
Any country that does business with Russia will face very serious sanctions.
The US president is ready to sign a new package of sanctions against the Russian Federation. According to Reuters, the White House has already signaled Congress. The 47th president will approve the bill, but only on his own terms. If it includes a provision that secures for him the personal exclusive right to make the final decision on whether to impose sanctions or not, this is exactly what becomes the main bargaining chip.
For the White House and the President, it has always been important that the sanctions package contains a clause guaranteeing the President the right to make the final decision on sanctions. Therefore, if this is included, I think the President will consider signing the bill, said a source in the White House.
The bill was authored by Republican Lindsey Graham and Democrat Richard Blumenthal. The document provides for 500% tariffs on imports from countries that purchase Russian oil, gas, and uranium. The goal is not just to strike at the Kremlin, but also to cut off the lifeline to all of Moscow's partners who continue to support the financing of the war.
At this point, Trump is determined to put additional pressure on the Russian Federation, particularly on its oil market. Quite actively,
Trump's new sanctions could deal a devastating blow to the Kremlin's economy. The Russian oil market risks losing its key buyers. India, China, and Middle Eastern countries are under threat. Trump, meanwhile, proposes to expand the list of targets and add Iran to the sanctions list, a country that helps Moscow circumvent restrictions and strengthen oil schemes.
When we clearly understand that 60% of Russian oil is bought by China and the Americans are against it, are unlikely to escalate any forms of sanctions, especially after the meeting between Xi Jinping and Trump. Essentially, they have taken a one-year timeout on imposing mutual sanctions. Most likely, part of the Russian oil market in China will remain. At the same time, countries that, for example, were among the top in terms of oil purchases, second and third, referring to India and Turkey, are now actively seeking alternative sources of supply. And
While across the ocean they are preparing to deliver a decisive blow, RAFI is dealing with the consequences of yet another sanctions package. At the end of October, the US introduced a new package of sanctions against the Russian oil sector. Rosneft, Lukoil, and 31 of their subsidiaries fell under the restrictions.
they have already been seriously shaken. The Russian market dropped sharply. The price of Urals really did plummet sharply. And at the same time, yes, as of today, there is a very serious problem with foreign assets, particularly those of Lukoil. At the same time, we've already heard that the American company Chevron has received preliminary approval from the US Treasury Department to negotiate with Lukoil about a purchase of their foreign assets. The approximate value of this package is estimated at around $20 billion. Well, in any case, such developments are underway and we're watching closely. That is, we need to understand that the assets we're talking about are essentially the tools through which the Russian Federation sells its oil. If these tools end up in other hands, then Russia will have significantly fewer opportunities to maintain the current volume of oil sales it has today.
If Trump does end up signing the bill and countries reduce their purchases under US pressure, the blow to Russia's budget revenues will be catastrophic. Even Russian propaganda will no longer be able to hide the real economic consequences. And the Kremlin will feel pressure it has never faced throughout the entire full-scale war.
Until we see the final version of the bill, until it is, well, at the very least, approved by the majority of the American parliament, in this situation, it's nothing more than, let's say, threats.
According to Politico, the White House expects that by the end of this month, or even this week, all sides may agree on the conditions needed to end the war. I'm following the story and will keep you updated. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.